It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, Private Investigator Ed Opperman. You can find me at Opperman Investigations and Digital Forensic Consulting, either through my website, emailrevealer.com, or you could just email me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com. If you like our show, be sure and check out our Patreon, Opperman Report Patreon, where we put exclusive content up there every Saturday night. And, of course, our archives are always free. You go to Spreaker.com, you can find the show for free. And there's a chat room in there. You get an email notification anytime we put up new content. I got for you today an incredibly fascinating story that you think you know. You think you heard of this story. But there's so much more to it. We have Ohio attorney Rocky Ratliff, who's the attorney for 30-some plaintiffs in a lawsuit against Ohio State University for decades of sexual abuse that went on at this university. Mr. Ratliff, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Thank you so
Thanks
much
for having me on.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to clarify that, I am an attorney here in Ohio. I've been licensed since 2012. Prior to that, I was a probation officer in the county that I'm in, which is Marion County, Ohio, and I did that for about 6 years. Also, prior to that, my background would be I was in juvenile corrections as at a rehab facility, lockdown rehab facility, for about 6 years. So that I have a background in criminal law, basically. But our firm here in Marion, I guess I'm in a unique situation as an attorney. I'm in with my father, who's been an attorney for about 42 years, and two other individuals, one of them being my brother, who also wrestled at Ohio State after me and was an All-American at Ohio State. So I have a unique situation in this case as I'm an attorney for 46 guys at Ohio State, and I have my own individual case, which my father represents me in against Ohio State because I was an athlete, former athlete at Ohio State. So, I have a unique thing in this case because I was a former athlete there as well as an attorney.
And you're also a survivor of Dr. Strauss?
Yes. Basically, my wrestling career from high school, I went to a university, Hofstra University, for 2 years. I was a scholarship athlete there for 2 years, a starter. They fired our coach, so there was about 5 guys from Ohio that then transferred back. Me and my suite mate actually transferred back to Ohio State, one of the schools I was looking at when I originally left. So I wrestled at Ohio State from 95 to 97, and Dr. Strauss would have been let go ultimately in 98, but around there he stopped being, at some point in time, and while I was there, he stopped being our treating physician, if you will.
Oh, well, that's good news, at least, yeah. Well, explain to us what's the basis for this litigation. What went on at OSU?
Yeah, so from Dr. Strauss comes into OSU about 1979 to he ultimately is dismissed in 98, and they give him emeritus status, honorary status, and let him go out in the street. He practices here for a couple years, and then ultimately we know he goes to Southern California, or maybe Central California, somewhere in South California, where we believe he was treating underprivileged youth at like free clinic type establishment. And ultimately he commits suicide in 2005. But from 1979 to the end of his career, he was a professor at the university for medical students, obviously. He was working in the student health center where normal students would get their medications or be treated at the university. And then he was also part of the athletic department from 79 until, I believe, 96 is when he stopped being part of the athletic department because of one of the coaches, the fencing coach, had actually stepped up, and then they were having other problems with him. But then I think he kind of was phased out around 96, 97 is when he phased out. And this litigation involves, at least for my group, I have a couple things that are different than others, but the first part of our litigation is basically what Dr. Strauss was kind of doing to the athletes, and you have anywhere from just groping sessions with the athletes all the way to, depending on what athlete you're talking to, oral sex and or anal penetration with some of the guys. So it's a whole vast array of litigation as far as what he did to each individual guy. Then we also have where, and obviously he's a doctor at Ohio State. We're told to go treat with this guy, and then we go from that to there was our facility, and a lot of the facilities, but most of my clients' facilities was a place called Larkins Hall, where the athletes for wrestling, fencing, gymnastics, both male and female, swimming and diving, both male and female, are housed. That place was a very sexually deviant area, and athletes were getting almost daily where they would have people showering with them or masturbating to them or watching them or, taking pictures of them.
Well, let me stop you for a second, Mr. Ratliff.
Yep.
And the reason for that is that the college allowed anybody with a college ID, employment ID, you could be a landscaper over there, and they will let you go shower with the boys.
Yes, and for most people, probably your audience would get, this is the Student Health Center, the Student Activity Center, if you will,
okay,
where your intramural sports are going to be. This also houses classes. This building had classes, especially in the physical education department. So this building is ran by, I believe, the Department of Physical Education, which is under the education wing of Ohio State. So this was not an athletic facility. This was a huge facility, I think 3 or 4 stories. I mean, it had been around forever, but it would have your intramural basketball courts, and if you were going to get on a treadmill, you would be there. To get into this facility, it was monitored. You would need a student ID, and you would have to be a student or an employee or a staff member at The Ohio State University. So this is the people that are able to use this facility. That's where, a lot of the stuff, I think, where guys were really complaining to the university was under this, that they put us in an environment that had this kind of sexual deviancy.
Well,
and then the
can
last
you describe
part of our,
what the sexual deviancy was?
It's a lot of it, but on a daily basis, or at least an every other day basis, a wrestler would come in, you would go into your locker room, which was separate from everywhere. So we had a separate locker room, but we shared the bathrooms, the shower facilities, and a sauna. So for wrestlers, obviously cutting weight, we use the sauna quite a bit with the rest of the facility. So we had a separate locker room where we would change, we would come out, go to our practice, and then we would come back. Once you came back in the sport of wrestling, taking showers, they want you to do that immediately because the infection you can get from the wrestling mat or touching other guys that might be infected with skin diseases such as ringworm or impetigo or herpes or something like that. Mm. So it was very important that wrestlers shower right after their practice. When we would come down to shower, you obviously go into your locker room, you get undressed, and you get your towel on, and then you would go take a shower. Now, this is a public shower, an open shower. You would have guys that would come in that would sit there and masturbate to you. I mean, they would actually be erect and sit there and lather up and just start looking at you and start openly masturbating in the shower. Or you could find them in the stalls that if you open the door to, like a restroom stall, you could then see into the shower. So they would crack doors of that to watch you. They would come by, take pictures. There would be people that would just openly rub themselves in front of us. I mean, that's the stuff we're talking about. Plus, there was always guys being caught, and it was usually guy on guy. I mean, they've caught people in our wrestling room when I was there having sex, people outside in the bathroom outside the wrestling room having sex where we practiced, people in the stairwell that led to, it was a private stairwell that led to our wrestling room having sex. That's the kind of things that we're talking about.
And you made efforts to kind of change the time of the practices so it wouldn't attract these men, right? But they would find that anyway.
Yeah, we were constantly doing anything we could the coaches were. So the coaches would say, hey, we're going to move practice times in the hopes to not have this around. These efforts to not be around these guys or to get separate facilities, as far as we can tell, we're being told by our coaches, hey, we're trying to get out of here because this is a terrible environment for training for you guys. We're trying to go to other facilities. And we're changing practice times to hopefully then the crowd, so to speak, that show up. It was about 10 guys, 6 to 10 guys every day showing up to do these kind of activities aren't around us. The problem is once we changed it, somehow they knew we changed it, and it would go right back to what it was. So it wouldn't matter what time we had our practices. These guys would constantly show up.
Now, what about fist fights?
That was the life at Larkins Hall.
Were any fist fights would break out or anything like that?
Well, you were told, or you knew, I guess, and they actually had meetings. I think there was in the complaint there would be meetings, in our complaint that we alleged, there was a meeting, especially in '93, where guys were so outraged they were about to the point of fighting, okay? Physically fighting. This wasn't like, these aren't guys that you would think, they're not physically imposing guys. Most of these guys are older. We thought were either staff members or professors at the university. So the fact of a young wrestler like ourselves, like prevailing in a fight was never a question. It's just whether you're going to do it and get in trouble by the university. There was a meeting held at least in 1993 where some of my clients were told by the then head coach that, hey, if you touch anyone, you yell, you touch, you grab them, any kind of fights, you're out of here, you're off this team, you're out of the university, and we're not going to sign a release so you can go wrestle anywhere else. So you pretty much got to take it. Now, the guys obviously objected to that and said, well, who's protecting us? And the coach just let us know, or let them know at the time, that, hey, you're there. That's what you're doing.
And who were those two coaches that ran that meeting?
Well, at that meeting would have been head coach Russ Hellickson, assistant coach Jim Jordan, and assistant coach Mark Coleman.
Assistant coach Jim Jordan. Is that the same Jim Jordan, Representative Jim Jordan?
Yeah, that would be the 4th District Congressman Jim Jordan.
Wears those short sleeve shirts all the time and doesn't wear a jacket and likes to badger people. I
don't know if it's short sleeve. I think he rolls his sleeves up to look like the hardworking man that he has there.
Right.
But that's his image. But that was known. But it was also known that if you potentially grab one of these guys, I mean, you're just going to be in trouble.
Yeah, you're going to lose your scholarship.
Be yelling to. Yeah, guys would constantly be cursing at these guys,
really,
or saying, "What are you looking at?" with some explicit language there, like "What the hell are you looking at?" And then just keep going and going. And then sometimes the guys would leave, sometimes they wouldn't. But it was daily. They were trying to come in and have a peep show or watch us, and it was very disturbing for anybody at that time because we would just. The rigors of the sport, you're tired, you're hurt half the time, and these guys are constantly coming in just to basically watch you. And it was just very disturbing.
They're constantly trying to make weight, too, always trying to lose weight and stuff.
We're losing weight. Yeah.
Brutal, yeah. Now, your lawsuit involves 46 guys, 46 students, but there's another lawsuit that involves how many other students?
Yeah, so currently, and I get this all the time where I got people that think that Ohio State did settle, but they settled with approximately about 30-some% of the claimants, so that would be 162 that they settled with. My lawsuit has 46 plus my own, so 47 are with me. There's another 100 and approximately 5 guys with a firm. Multiple attorneys are in that. The lead attorney is named by Rex Sharp. He's out of Kansas. And there's a couple guys in there that I know, Steve Etsy and Robert Allard. Steve Etsy is, I know, involved in the Michigan or the state up north lawsuits that they have with their doctor that was pretty much doing the same thing. And then Robert Allard out in California, I think he dealt or is continuing to deal with USA Gymnastics. I think he had some cases with them concerning the state up north, Michigan State's girls with Dr. Nasser. So that's that group of kind of the head attorneys there. Then there's another group of about 93 individuals, a main group which is led by attorney Scott Smith out of Columbus. And he has a couple attorneys out of New York City, Debbie and Alan. And then there's a public justice out of Washington, D.C., and an attorney, Adele, is helping the Scott Smith group. So public justice is involved trying to help that group as well. So those are the main groups, and then there's a couple one-offs. The settling group is a Wright Schulte, which is out of Dayton, Ohio, and they have some attorneys in Cleveland. Those guys, I think, now have another 10 to 15 guys, even though they settled, but they have another 10 or 15 that have stepped forward and came in. So there's over, 250 guys still in this thing out of over 400.
Okay, so I lost count. It's a huge number of young men that were put through hell. And also, too, when I read your complaints you sent over to me, many of these young men were molested multiple times, some of them 30 times. Yeah.
So what you have is the dynamic here is we're talking Dr. Strauss is the treating physician, and Dr. Strauss obviously is doing all these things, but he is basically getting clearance by the university, and multiple complaints were made, and usually you would make them to training staff because that's who we were constantly around is our trainers, which were obviously medical staff, but trainers and student trainers. That were, the student trainer is there to be a trainer, so they're learning, so they're constantly around you. In wrestling, we had 2 or 3 constantly student trainers, who then you report to the head trainer at Larkins. So we're always reporting stuff to them, but they're always telling us, hey, this is totally legit exams, this is fine, it's normal, he's a very good doctor, he's thorough. He was also like an Olympic doctor for Olympic sports like wrestling. He was the wrestling Olympic doctor, so he worked for USA Wrestling. All of us knew that. So he was very reputable, and we're being told the whole time that, that these are legit exams. Even when you complain or you'd be mad or, highly mad, upset, you would go to them and they'd say, hey, that's Dr. Strauss. He's good, or he's just being thorough. He's just making sure you're able to compete. So when you have like 30 times, it's because he was our treating physician. So anything where you're trying to get medication or a severe injury, he's looking at you. Sometimes even the trainer would say, hey, this is what I think it is, but you need to see the doc for confirmation. So we're always getting directed right to the man. And that's how you can get so many times with the same doctor.
So you got about 400 victims, right? And they all have to pass through this doctor. But now the average person that sees the headline of this story and doesn't really delve into it and hasn't read the complaint the way I have, thinks this story is, well, they, 1 or 2 students every now and then would go over to the doctor's office and he would manipulate their genitals and then he would leave. But it was much more systematic than that, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think the report... So when they did an investigation, when this comes out in 2019, they then make their complaints. Now they then get Ohio State refers it and gets I think they refers it to the Attorney General, who then says, hey, we need to investigate this. And then a firm by Perkins Coie comes out and they investigate it. They get a prosecutor that's highly reputable. A former prosecutor, highly reputable U.S. district attorney that was out of Chicago. I can't remember the name off the top of my head. Well, they come out with their report a year later after reviewing over 500 people, or approximately 500 people. They also had 2 doctors that they used as experts that looked at all this, and they came out and said at least 177 athletes have been abused, but we believe the totals are around 1,500, or give or take. Male athletes have been abused from 1979 to 96, 97. So they're saying that that's kind of the number, and it could get as high as 3,000 is what they came out. Now, when that comes out making that finding, immediately the university, through President Drake and and the Board of Trustees Chairman Gasser issue an apology letter that basically says there's a bunch of wrongdoing here, and it's a systematic failure of the university not to protect its students and its student athletes. So it was definitely a systematic thing, because the doctor is going, not only like we had talked about before, he's not only treating us, but he's going to the student health center. So some of these guys are being treated. I represent currently three guys. One of them was a student trainer. He wasn't an athlete. And then two guys were student employees. They were university students given jobs in athletic. One of them worked in St. John's arena, and the other one worked in Larkins Hall as an equipment manager, student equipment manager. They were working, paying their way through school, and went, and because they were athletic guys working with the athletic department, were sent to Dr. Strauss for exams where he was trying to masturbate them. So this was definitely systematic. Our yearly physicals had to be done by this man, and to get clearance. If you had an injury as a wrestler, you had to go to him, or he wouldn't clear you to compete at the events. And every time that you went to him, he would basically tell you, hey, I need to do a full, thorough exam, or I'm not going to clear you. So your choice is let him do a full exam, or you don't wrestle this weekend, or you don't compete, or you don't do anything. So it was definitely systematic.
And also, too, some of these exams took place at his personal residence.
Oh, yeah. He would have guys. Doc Strauss was he was like a quirky kind of guy, but he was very open and wanted to belong. So he would always be coming up to guys saying, hey, how you doing? He was always giving us his card. If you had an injury, he'd give you a card and say, if you need anything, call me, even if it's at my residence. And at the time, looking back, that's kind of crazy, and most guys didn't take advantage of that. Some guys did. Most guys didn't. But the training staff at Ohio State, him being ultimately on top, but I would have student trainers come in at 6 in the morning if I needed to rehab my ankle. I almost thought I broke it, had a high ankle sprain. They would come in almost any time, like, hey, I can work you around your class schedule or practice schedule, because during the times of practice or around them, they're super busy taping all kinds of athletes and looking at things. So they would set you up times to rehabilitate you on different times. So they were very open to that. Different times, or I'll come in later, or come in early to help you. Now, Strauss went above and beyond that, and he would even ask guys to come to his house. So I have at least 3 individuals, probably more, now that I'm thinking about 4 or 5 probably, that went to his house where he was trying to manipulate and masturbate guys at his house.
And besides this activity under the pretext of a physical doctor's examination, he would also invite them to dinner and lunch. And
oh, yeah. That was constant. He would, try to say, I had one guy, I laughed at his story when he told me, because at the beginning of every year, the NCAA has a ton of rules about not taking extra benefits. So we'd have to attend these meetings. And when I say meetings, I'm talking like 8 hours of meetings. So you're in these meetings talking about what you can and can't do as an amateur athlete on benefits from, let's say, donors, if they try to approach you and try to get you to take money, or an agent, how you're to get out of that situation. I had one individual I represent. Doc kept trying to ask him out to dinner, and he would say, Doc, that's an extra benefit by the NCAA. I can't take it. So he tried to get out of it by trying to throw the compliance rules on the doctor, and the doc said, those don't apply to me, because I'm the team doctor, so I can, obviously take you out for the steak dinner. Some guys I represent took him up on that. I mean, anywhere from, and sometimes it wouldn't be, when we talk dinner, sometimes he would be asking you to a very nice place. Other times it'd just be like, hey, you want to go grab a bite at Wendy's? Looking back now, he was trying to make friends and be a part of it so he could, like any manipulator or any person that you see in a sexual assault case, and you have a very extensive criminal background, I mean, he's trying to be your friend. Yeah. He's trying to groom you, is the correct word that you're using there, is grooming you so he can then do certain things to you. And
you also have evidence of him calling the dorms to...
Oh yeah, there was several houses. He would call dorms, but there was several houses. There was 2 or 3 places we would consider wrestling houses, meaning everybody in there that lives in that place. That's let's say a 6-bedroom place. Everybody in there is a wrestler. So there was about 2 or 3 places. And now this is back when obviously we had the caller IDs. They were in white boxes,
right.
And it would come up Richard H. Strauss, and it would have his number. And he was calling that place, that facility, all the time, the house there all the time. And he was looking for basically a couple of the guys that everybody knew that was kind of Doc's favorites. So a couple guys got it, I think, worse than the rest of us, but, he dished out the manipulation and the sexual abuse pretty evenly, but a couple guys, I think, submitted a lot easier. So he would constantly call for those individuals.
And also, too, he would offer to help the young men with their modeling careers.
Oh, yeah. That was a constant. Doc was always, he had a hobby, I guess you would call it, and he would tell you, hey, I got a hobby of photography. Why don't you let me, after an exam, I mean, this is stuff he's saying to you during exams, oh, you have a nice physique, and can we take some pictures, because that's a hobby of mine. Obviously, I'm a doctor, it's the human body, but it's a hobby of mine, and I've had people sign on to modeling careers. Now, one of our teammates that is not my client, but one of our teammates got a big-time modeling career. I don't know. I think Doc had some stuff to do with it, but did get a big-time modeling career, and everybody knows about it on the team. So he would use that to try to get you to take pictures and for him. And these would be very provocative, take your shirt off, kind of in your skimpies. Sometimes, hey, totally nude, because that's what they want type pictures. He would also show up to facilities and practice facilities with his camera and just start shooting guys. Like as you're naked weighing in, he's got a camera just shooting things. As you're preparing for practice, I got a hockey guy that was half dressed, putting on his skates like he's got his bottom half on, and Doc's over there shooting pictures and telling him what great pictures he got of him. And then, hey, once I get these developed, I'll give you copies of these.
But he actually had trouble getting them developed, didn't he? He actually had trouble getting them developed because they started turning them down.
Exactly. His pictures were so provocative. The place he took his film would exit and say, hey, we're not producing these films, man. This is not right, We're going to have to take we're
going to have to take a commercial break, but just to get the gist of this, we're talking about close to 3,000 young men that were affected by this negatively. Many coaches and staff were aware of this. The neighborhood knew that this was a place to go for this kind of activity and go to the stairwells and loiter around the bathroom and stuff like that. Is there any possible way that people didn't know what was going on?
You mean the people that were there?
Yeah,
in the facility.
Is it possible that anybody didn't know what was going on? Even a wrestler, that this wasn't common knowledge?
Impossible.
It'd
be impossible. It was a daily thing in Arkansas for wrestling. Daily.
Yeah.
It'd be impossible.
And if people read this complaint, and by the way, can I put that complaint up online?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
It's public record. I mean, it's a federal filing.
Yeah, if people read this complaint, man, you're going to be shocked. There's so much more in this. There's no way we can even cover everything that's in the complaint. We're here today with attorney Rocky Ratliff, and we're talking about the Ohio State University sex abuse scandal of these young men. Just imagine these poor kids. They leave home for the first time, 18 years old, and they're subjected to this crazy doctor, and then as years go by, school's not helping us. Nobody's helping us. Nobody's listening to us. One case, Rocky, I read that the coaches threatened the guys. Says, hey, if you guys don't shape up, I'm going to send you over to the doctor.
Yeah, there was I believe it was the tennis coach or one of the coaches. I think it was tennis. That basically, hey, you guys aren't working hard enough. However, if you're going to keep slacking, I'm going to send you over to Doc Strauss. So he was using it as a punishment incentive for his athletes to start working harder in practice.
So here we have a situation where there's open sexual activity going on in the locker rooms and the showers. He's taking kids back to his personal residence. Any kid that goes into that for an exam gets a full body exam. You got a bump on your head, and he's checking your testicles and your anus too as well, inches away from his face. He's rubbing you to the point of masturbation. So we were saying before, there's no way that people could not be aware of this inappropriate behavior, right?
Well, getting back to that, and I think we had that right before the commercial break, but first of all, the actual facility. In the sport of wrestling, it's obviously hands-on. I got to show you the move. Also, your assistant coaches are some of the high-level guys trying to make the Olympic team, so they're training every day. So they get paid to basically train. So any assistant coach is pretty much still competing in the sport of wrestling, just not at the college level. They've graduated and they're at the Olympic level. So every day they're competing with us and showing us and trying to make us better. And they're coming down and getting the same treatment because they're showering the same way we are. So they're in there with these creeps all over, seeing the sexual deviancy. Also, you would have guys complaining all the time. For instance, as I'm getting dressed, a guy would probably, we would get dressed. We would be, hey, do you want to go grab a bite to eat? And the guy would say, hey, I got to go see Doc Strauss. A guy would say, hey, watch your testicles. Or, watch your nuts, so to speak, is because they knew what was going to go happen to that dude. It was an open conversation to watch yourself. Now, you got to also remember, Dr. Strauss was given a locker in every locker room. So when I have to check in at the start, I got to go see an equipment manager. He gives me my locker number. He gives me my lock. I go in. Dr. Strauss had a locker in every locker room. Dr. Strauss would hurry up with exams so he could come into the locker room, get naked, shower with us, watch us, excessively lather himself to us. Then he would come back into that same locker room, and then what I call patting off. He would take his towel and pat off. I could come in after Doc Strauss into the locker room, and he's there patting, and I would be fully dressed, out of the locker room, going to get something to eat, and Doc is just still standing in the corner, back to his locker, watching everybody, still patting and drying off. You would come to the locker room sometimes, and Doc Strauss would be reading, let's say, the Ohio State Lantern or the New York Times, fully naked, sitting there waiting for guys to come in. And you got to remember, his locker is several lockers, maybe 3 or 4, from the entire coaching staff of the wrestling team. So they have to see, when I say it's impossible, they're seeing the same things we do. This guy is in there every day. And you have to remember, Doc Strauss, like I told you, the coaches are actually working out with us. The coaches are sweaty from the sport of wrestling. Doc Strauss isn't working out with us. Doc Strauss just showed up to take a shower with us.
And he would take several showers a day.
Oh, yeah. We are now getting reports from other sports like gymnastics and swimming and all these other guys that said he would show up and take showers with us. Hockey, he would show up when they're taking showers because practice times are all at different times set by the coaches. So Doc Strauss had to be the cleanest man in Ohio. He's probably taken 5 or 6 showers. And this is all after the fact. We didn't have this knowledge as wrestlers. We just thought it was us. But now, once this case comes out and we're sharing with everybody else, I did not know he had a locker in every sports locker room.
How could you have a man that is so obviously a sexual predator and the college do nothing about it? What was their motivation to let him get away with this?
Well, we think some of the motivation, number one, Doc Strauss was a very good doctor, meaning take out all the sexual stuff. He could heal you pretty quickly, always would get you back as quickly as you could. That was number one. Number two, he was well respected in a lot of different areas. I think he was respected in the Olympic sports. He was nationally recognized in those areas. So he would make himself go in there. And I think a lot of times he gave countless hours to the university and didn't expect payment. Like, he would show up, he would do trips with the teams, he would do this. Some of this he's not really getting, high dollars for, so they tolerate it. And I think the biggest thing that we brought forward, and the biggest reason, is because Doc Strauss was one of the foremost experts in anabolic steroids during the steroid era. He's been countlessly, he has academic, and you can go through and pull up his academic, and we gave some of them. I don't know if these are all his in our complaint. We give some of his writings, his academic writings, as to anabolic steroids.
It's very well documented. It's very well documented, the articles he wrote and the studies he did on anabolic steroids. Now, let me ask you this. Wouldn't it be enough of a scandal that if Representative Jim Jordan was aware that there was rampant steroid use going on under his assistant coaching? Isn't that enough? Forget the sexual stuff. Isn't that a big enough of a scandal?
Yeah, but if during that time and even today, Ohio State don't even acknowledge that was going on.
Yeah.
So, you know what I mean? So you got to have a scandal, somebody's got to have credibility. We've given this. I know there's been countless interviews that have been given where guys have brought this up. It's just not me being their attorney. Guys have told other reporters who have totally not done anything as far as reporting this. So we're talking Ohio State University, that is one of the biggest top 3 attended universities, probably the top athletic budget or one of the top 5 athletic budgets in the entire country. So when you go give reports to local media or other people, they just don't report it.
Well, we're going to have you come back as many times as you want. Yeah, we're going to have you come back as many times as you want, and I'm going to interview as many of these young men as you can find me, okay? Let me ask you this, because we're starting to run out of time. What about the cover-up? There was even a public relations firm that was brought in to tamper with witnesses.
Yes. They're in our complaint, and people can read this. Basically, when this hits, Jim Jordan is top 3. Looks like his name's probably going to be for the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the U.S. House of Representatives at the time. And this story hits. And I think in May, sometime Jim Jordan just, says, hey, I didn't know anything about sexual abuse. Well, they get one of the whistleblower back in, and he says he absolutely knew about it because, like I just explained, it's impossible to know that this stuff is not going on. Guys talk about it all the time. At that point in time, Jim's kind of, it's well documented, he hired a PR firm that is starting to call guys and say, hey, can you basically tell that Jim Jordan didn't know about this? There's no way Jim would know. And they're, trying to get wrestlers. So this totally divided the wrestling community because you have to either stick up for your former assistant coach and say he didn't know, or you have to tell the truth about sexual abuse, anabolic steroids, and everything that happened at the university you love. That's what they did to guys. They put them in 2 camps. So this PR firm goes around and it tries to set up people to say and give statements that says Jim Jordan didn't know and pressured guys to give those statements. So we don't know the extent truly of how bad Doc Strauss's sexual abuse is because we have guys trying to stick up for their assistant coach, a guy that they love. And that's where it's been totally divided in the wrestling community.
Yeah, the relationship
with the university.
Yeah, the relationship with your coaches is very. Yeah.
Oh, it's destroyed.
Yeah.
I mean, quite honestly, it's destroyed. So guys that brought us into the university to tell us to stick up for the weak, or that would always say have a voice. I mean, these are the lessons that our head coach Russ Hellickson and Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan to me personally, was my icon. I mean, he was an icon to me. He was my idol growing up as a wrestler. He was one of the toughest guys in our country in the sport of wrestling. So many stories about Jim as an assistant coach could destroy the entire lineup of the Ohio State wrestling team because that's how good Jim Jordan was. He was one of our top guys. He was like 1 or 2, depending on the day, of our Olympians. So Jim Jordan, to me, is a total icon of the sport. He was my idol growing up. Jim Jordan recruited me. Ultimately, I left and went to Hofstra University, like I had told earlier in the show, and came back. When I got back, Jim Jordan had left to be a state rep. I live in Jim Jordan's district. I've supported Jim Jordan. I can't remember. This year might be the first time I'm not going to vote for Jim Jordan. I've always voted for Jim Jordan. I've always supported him. My families went to fundraisers. I loved Jim Jordan. But Jim Jordan is totally not telling the truth about what happened at The Ohio State University.
And Rocky, you told me
simple.
You told me in our conversation earlier this week that you believe that Jim Jordan actually confronted Dr. Strauss on behalf of the wrestlers.
Yes. If you look at our wrestlers and our complaint, if you're a Jim Jordan fan and you read that, there's not going to be anything in there that's going to tell you, well, Jim Jordan participated in the sexual abuse. In fact, it's the opposite, because what we are saying is Jim Jordan is lying about it happening, but Jim Jordan was part of conversations. In fact, if you read through the complaint under Dinyasha Yetz, and this has been widely reported in media, and this is how it even started, Dinyasha was a transfer just like me. Dinyasha went, got a physical from Strauss, and totally went off the hinges. He's a very passionate guy, and was going off the hinges on what the heck just happened. He marches into the locker room, and there's 5 or 6 guys that have all corroborated his story that he is going off the hinges in the locker room. At that point in time, Jim Jordan and head coach Russ Hellickson say, we're going to get this sorted out right now because this is so egregious. They take the athlete to Doc Strauss's office, okay? So Doc Strauss would have been meeting with this athlete and giving him a physical in his private office outside the training room. You know, it's connected to the training room, but it's a private closed door. They all three, the athlete, Jordan, Hellickson, as the head coach, all go into the Doc's office. It gets so heated. At some point in time, they have to ask the athlete to leave the room. So the athlete then leaves the room, and he's standing outside the door as head coach Russ Hellickson and Jim Jordan is giving that doctor the business about being too hands-on with the athletes. What are you doing? At that point in time, after that gets finished, at that point in time, they come outside, grab the athlete and say, hey, that's never going to happen to you again, buddy. We got it straightened out. And they leave. So Jim Jordan, if the truth be told, actually confronted the doctor in the presence of the athlete to try to stick up for him for being too hands-on or, you know, manipulating. And I think he gave him a digital rectal exam and manipulating during that exam.
But Mr. Ratliff, no, Jim Jordan, no, his locker was right next to Dr. Strauss's locker in the locker room?
It's either next to, but it might be two, you know, lockers go right in order, one right after another, just like any locker room.
Nearby.
It would have been in the vicinity of 3 or 4 away, maybe.
And Jim Jordan would spend a lot of time in the sauna where Dr. Strauss was in there naked.
Oh yeah.
Lounging.
Yeah. Plenty of my clients have talked about that. Jim Jordan was training at the time. Jim Jordan was one of the best athletes in our country at the time in the sport of wrestling. He would have been using those facilities to lose weight and use it, and a lot of guys use saunas in the sport of wrestling for therapeutic, you know, to get in there, shed a few pounds, obviously for weight loss, but also therapy as far as it just feels good on your body, you know,
Sure.
if you use the sauna. So he would be in there. Jim Jordan even gave an award, which was called King of the Sauna, to an athlete, the guy that would be in the sauna, you know, basically that would talk the most trash in the sauna. Guys would, you know, jab at each other and talk crap when they were in the sauna.
Sure.
And Jim Jordan actually gave an award called King of the Sauna.
Okay.
So, he was in there constantly.
Let me ask you this, too, because we're running out of time. There's a Jeffrey Epstein, Les Wexner, Abigail Wexner connection to all this, too, as well. Can you brief us on that?
Yeah, we had, I think it was in December of 19, a group of my guys got together and said, basically they thought it was unfair because Abigail Wexner sits on the board of the Ohio State trustees. So my guys basically said this is just unfair that she is deciding our fate, yet she's part of a lawsuit that has an individual that was sexually assaulted at her property or the Wexner property by Mr. Epstein. So we asked them to look into that, like how can she sit in judgment of us in this case if she's got her own sexual assault problems going on. So we asked them to look into both Les and Abigail Wexner for the ties to Jeffrey Epstein and this lady's story. As sexual survivors, she's out fighting her own fight, so we asked them to step forward, the university and these different agencies, to ask for that. Now, the university at some point in time did find that Jeffrey Epstein, in their accounting, had gave, we think it's more, but the accounting showed over $300,000 that the university returned to the Ohio Attorney General's office to fight sex trafficking that was, quote-unquote, Epstein-donated money. But there's no doubt that Epstein and Wexner have donated vast amounts of money to the university. I mean, that's easy. Wexner's name is on several buildings, including the medical center, the football field, training facility, all that stuff.
The medical center where Dr. Strauss has an office.
He would go over there occasionally.
Okay.
Dr. Strauss mainly was in Larkins, but he would go over there occasionally for football guys. I mean, no doubt about that.
And so Lex Wexner, he's still on the trustee as well?
He is not any longer. His wife, though, Abigail, is the, I think her title would be vice chair of the board of trustees, but she is the second in command, so to speak, of the university board of trustees.
We're just about out of time. What would you like to leave us with in all this?
Well, I think, quite honestly, most of my guys were injured more than or abused more than the guys that are still or that settle, because I get a lot of guys that think that this case is over, and it's not. For a lot of guys, there's a lot of pain still going on. But I think the most important thing that any one of us would want anyone to know, because a lot of our guys talk about maybe in a far off place or some small town somewhere like most of us are from, that an 8-year-old or a 10-year-old boy is going to get his first physical. So we're hoping that just because it's male, because this is the biggest male sexual abuse scandal at any university level, just because it's a male, it can't happen. So we're part of what we consider the Me Too movement, that if you see something, you need to say something, or something's off, hopefully that kid will get heard. I mean, that's our biggest thing that we want, is to bring light to this. And we've obviously sued the university for damages, but we're asking that there's a ton of education. And for the first time, hospitals, at least in the area of Ohio, have started asking little boys for the first time, has anybody inappropriately touched you? They had that question. The social workers at the hospital had those questions for little girls, but have never asked that for little boys. So for the first time, they're starting to ask that. Social workers are being trained in Central Ohio to start asking little boys, has a doctor ever inappropriately touched you, or anybody else, an athletic coach, and ever touched you? So we're hoping to have some of those changes, and we still want Ohio State to hear us. They're still not really paying attention. You got to remember, Ohio State settled with these guys and have taken a hardline stance to settle. So they have admitted their abuse to us. They said it was a systematic failure, but here's your money. If you don't like this amount, basically just get out of here then. And they've filed to dismiss us at this point in time. We want people to help us. They're trying to throw us out of court right now is the big thing.
Well, how can people help you? What can they do?
Well, I think they can call, the Ohio State Attorney General, because his office has got special counsel trying to throw us out of court. So, or they could call any of the Ohio legislatures, because there was a bill that actually never made it out of committee. They had one person talk out about it. They had 6 meetings on it, and the Ohio legislature never sent it to the floor, ever. Yet the Ohio Attorney General and the governor, they talk about how disgusting it is, and criminally we need to have a statute of limitation period for rape that are lifetime, but they're asking that Ohio State be, to dismiss all of us out of court and not really do that civilly. So it's unfathomable to me that criminally you could be charged forever, but a statute of limitation for sexual abuse would only be a couple of years.
Yeah, and many states, they've changed that too. They've made it.
Yeah,
they've made it more liberal.
The state up north, the state up north for me changed it. Pennsylvania changed it. California changed it. Yeah. New York changed it. All these guys have taken these actions, and Ohio State wants to do nothing. Ohio wants to do nothing as a state. It's amazing.
Yeah, maybe two people can call or write Representative Jim Jordan's office and ask him to do the right thing and speak out and call for a just settlement for these victims. And, no hard feelings.
Yeah, and for all intents and purposes, my guys would have said Jim did it then. He's just not doing it now. We feel abandoned by him, and it hurts. It really does, because all of us love Jim Jordan. All of us thought he was our friend. He was our coach. He was a clinician around here. He's still around here. Mm-hmm. And it really hurts. We all feel abandoned. So hopefully, he eventually does the right thing and tells the truth.
Rocky Ratliff, thank you so much. Feel free. Anything new comes up in this case, I'll put you right on the air. And any of these young men who you think would be a good guest on the show to describe their experience with this Dr. Strauss and what went on in that locker room, please send them my way.
Yes, I will.
Thank you so much, Rocky.
Thank you for having me.
Good night.
Yep, take care.